When a fake HOA rooms their garage and threatens their home, Mark and his family are pushed to the edge. But nothing could prepare them for what happens next when his 14-year-old son, in body armor and armed with an AK47, steps outside to face the invaders. This is a battle for more than just their property, it's a fight for everything they hold dear. Mark and Sarah had always believed they were living the American dream, a beautiful suburban home in a tight-knit community with well-kept lawns and safe streets. Their 14-year-old son, Jake, spent most of his time building model airplanes or playing video games, while his younger sister, Emily, kept to herself, content with her books and drawings. Everything was peaceful until the HOA Homeowners Association started getting involved in their lives. At first, it seemed harmless, annoying, but harmless. Little things like a misplaced trash can or a flower bed that didn't meet the HOA's approved guidelines. But slowly, these small infractions began to escalate. Notices arrived weekly, each more insistent than the last. Mark had always ignored them, brushing them off as petty annoyances. But this time, the letter was different. The HOA was demanding he remove or replace their garage door because it didn't match the approved aesthetic of the neighborhood. The absurdity of it hit Mark like a punch to the gut. But he shrugged it off. He wasn't going to let anyone dictate what he did with his property. The HOA's behavior started to feel personal. They weren't just following rules anymore, they were targeting Mark and his family. Another fine arrived, this time for an illegal garden gnome in their front yard. The HOA had started to send surveillance drones to monitor their property, something Mark considered a violation of privacy. Mark had been patient, but the last straw came when the HOA issued a warning to have their front fence torn down, claiming it was an eyesore and didn't conform to their guidelines. He fought back, refusing to comply, sending in emails explaining that the fence had been in place for over a decade. But the HOA wasn't interested in reason. Instead, they threatened legal action, claiming they would take the family to court if the fence wasn't removed. Mark wasn't one to back down, but something in his gut told him this wasn't going to end peacefully. One dark evening, while the family sat down to dinner, the worst happened. Mark was halfway through a story about his latest work trip when the sound of screeching tires interrupted him. The house jolted as something slammed into the garage door with immense force. Sarah screamed, and Jake jumped up from the table, instinctively grabbing a flashlight and running outside. Mark followed, heart pounding. When they reached the front yard, they were stunned. A dark SUV was backing out of their driveway, its front bumper smashed from where it had rammed into their garage. The garage door was caved in, splintered wood, and twisted metal visible in the dim light. The SUV's tire spun, but the driver was gone before Mark could even think to react. Sarah was shaking, holding Emily close. Mark tried calling the police, but he knew the HOA had gone too far this time. As he watched the SUV speed off into the night, his frustration boiled over. This was no longer a simple dispute, it was a full-on attack. And now, Mark was ready to fight back. The incident left the family shaken. Mark spent the rest of the night fixing what he could of the garage door, but it was only a temporary fix. He was furious, but he wasn't going to let this incident be the end. He installed motion detectors, set up cameras around the perimeter, and started researching ways to protect his family. Jake, who had always been a quiet, thoughtful kid, watched his father work. The next morning, Mark noticed Jake carrying something into his room, something heavy. It was a set of body armor and a tactical backpack. Mark stopped him in his tracks, confused. "What are you doing, Jake?" "I'm going to help protect us, Dad," Jake said calmly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Mark couldn't believe what he was hearing. Jake, a 14-year-old boy, had been taking self-defense classes and learning how to handle weapons. Mark had no idea. Jake explained that he'd been practicing with a rifle and a few other pieces of gear to keep the family safe, just in case things ever got worse. Mark didn't know whether to be proud or terrified, but the reality was clear. The HOA had escalated things to the point where Jake felt the need to arm himself. It was a sobering moment for Mark. He had always taught Jake to protect himself, but he never expected it to go this far. A few days after the attack, the HOA sent a letter demanding that Mark fix the garage door immediately, or they would take further action. Mark's blood boiled as he read the letter. The HOA had no shame. This time, they threatened to report the family to the local authorities for structural damage to the house. Mark decided he wasn't going to let them walk all over him anymore. But before he could respond, he received a knock on the door. It was the HOA in full force, demanding access to the garage. A tow truck had followed them, ready to take Mark's car because the HOA deemed it too old and out of place. This time, they came prepared. There were several members, all wearing suits and carrying legal documents. But Mark wasn't intimidated. He stood his ground, telling them to leave his property. The situation quickly escalated. The HOA members didn't back off. That's when Jake stepped outside, fully geared in body armor, his face serious, and holding an AK47. The HOA members froze. They weren't expecting a child to be the one to stop them. The tension was thick as Jake stood in front of the garage, rifle at his side, eyes locked on the HOA members. Mark could feel the weight of the moment. He tried to speak, trying to de-escalate, but the sight of his son holding an assault rifle said everything. The HOA members hesitated, glancing at each other, unsure of how to react. One of them spoke up, saying that Jake had no right to threaten them. But Jake, with calm precision, responded, "If you try to take this house or harm my family, I will defend us." Mark was terrified but proud. His son wasn't backing down. But Mark knew that if it went any further, it would spiral out of control. He stepped in front of Jake, trying to mediate the situation. But the HOA members still didn't leave. It was clear now. This wasn't a simple dispute. It was a battle for their home. One of the HOA members, clearly fed up with the standoff, pulled a weapon from his coat. The situation turned deadly in an instant. Mark moved quickly to shield Jake, but the air was thick with tension. Jake's grip tightened around the AK-47, and his stance grew more resolute. Mark realized this was the moment that everything could change. They could either walk away or fight for their home. "Please," Mark said to the HOA member with the gun, "we don't want violence." But it was too late. The HOA member wasn't backing down. It was only then that the sound of sirens pierced the air. The police arrived just in time. The HOA members immediately backed off when they saw the officers. Mark quickly explained the situation, and the officers took control. They could see that the HOA had crossed the line, and they began questioning the members about their illegal actions. Jake, still holding his position, didn't relax until the officers made it clear that the HOA would face legal consequences. The HOA members were now the ones who looked fearful. They had tried to intimidate the family, but the tables had turned. The investigation revealed that the HOA had been violating several local laws, including trespassing and damaging private property. They were fined heavily, and their actions led to an official reprimand. The family's home was safe. The HOA was forced to back down. But the emotional toll it had taken on the family was something that wouldn't go away easily. Jake became a hero in his own right, his bravery and calmness in the face of danger earning him respect from the neighbors. But Mark knew it wasn't just about the battle with the HOA. It was about the strength of his family and the lengths they would go to protect each other. In the days that followed, Mark and Sarah reflected on what had happened. They realized that they had learned something crucial, that no matter how safe they thought they were, things could change in an instant. But as a family, they could handle anything together. Jake's bravery had changed Mark's view of his son. He had always known Jake was tough, but to see him take charge in a moment of crisis made Mark proud. And Sarah, while still shaken, knew that their family was stronger than ever. The HOA was gone, but the scars remained. The family had learned the hard way that standing up for what's right sometimes required more than words, it required action.